Hey, what's good, internet? I am the Angry Philosopher on Drugs, and today I'm not actually that angry. Been having a good morning. I was originally going to make a post about one of the two or three incredibly stupid things I've seen on the internet over the weekend, but after spending some time working on a side project, listening to some really great music, and having a great conversation with the Navigator and Conceptual James on Facebook, Twitter, I thought I'd lay out some thoughts from my conversation with them that I just not been able to cram down into those 260 characters, and I didn't want to go into a tweet storm. So here we are. We're discussing political labels slash definitions. I really like the idea that James brought up, saying that a definition is a way of describing something that someone can then identify with, a description, and a label is something you slap on somebody else, a prescription. Really like that. So my dream, mostly this is comes from, look, I guess the ultimate example would be Ben Shapiro, mostly because Milo's a little less relevant these days. But both of them would frequently get slapped with the title alt-right, in spite of denying identity membership within the alt-right and being absolutely hated by members of the alt-right. They still get slapped with that because they're sort of not part of the mainstream media, so they're alternative, and they're from the right. And it's also a great little smear tactic. I believe Dirty Smear Merchant is the new have learned a code, or as the Bayou Tapestry I made meme says, hast thou considered an education in the language of complex electrical machinery? Moving on. So I would actually like to try and codify some political language, not for labeling people per se, but for giving people a framework within which to identify themselves, but also as a means of defense against being labeled, where if someone says you're with the alt-right, you can say, here's the framework I'm using. These people are alt-right. I am classical right, or classical centrist, or moderate, or something. So it's mostly a defense against prescriptive labeling. And again, it's based less on how people respond to specific issues, because there's just so many of them, to create a framework that would accompany every possible worldview on every possible social issue is just not going to work. It's just too messy. So my idea would be to use vague, general philosophies, the notions people default to when it comes to dealing with social issues like the economy, like a social safety net, like military spending, like border defense and security, etc. So the general theory I'm working with at the moment is that the left is defined by wanting more government. When there is a social issue, the left solution from within the framework I'm proposing is to give more resources to the government and let the government sort it out. The right, on the other hand, is more of an individualistic sort of philosophy. It's when there's a problem, work out how work out how people generally can solve it without bringing in the government. It's about stripping the government down to the bare essentials. Now, obviously, when you take either of those too far, it gets very bad. I mean, without any government structure at all, you get to anarchy, and with total government control, you wind up in a totalitarian state. Interestingly, I think once you get to total anarchy, anarchy is not too far from democracy, in the sense that sort of might makes right, and whoever can cobble together the biggest power base is going to be able to assert their will over others. So I'm starting to think it might not be a horseshoe so much as a complete ring, but that's a side note. So to start with, a centrist position would be someone who looks at each issue individually to determine if they should take a left approach or a right approach. Being a chronic sickly with and living in Australia, I am frequently at the mercy of our government, and I owe them an awful lot for supporting me this far. Without some basic universal health care, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't have made it this far. At the same time, I'm not a fan of just handing out money to anyone who asks for it, and I think a lot of the people in our country, or just the Western world all over, who are living on government benefits are doing so because it's the easiest thing to do. I mean, it's not hard to find interviews with people who are living on welfare who said, no point finding a job. I've already got it good here getting my government checks. So again, bit of left, bit of right. If I was to call someone a leftist, at least under my philosophy, it means that while they may have some more conservative or right-wing positions, their default is to immediately go to the government, to look to the government as a solution. It's the mindset that says, without a very good reason, we should centralise and let the government sort it out and give more authority to them, let them take care of it. Alternatively, someone on the right, when their go-to response, again without solid reasoning otherwise, is to simply take that power away from the government and put it in the hands of the individual or the free enterprise. So again, someone on the left may hold some conservative positions, but their default philosophy is going, if they had to weigh up their options, they're immediately going to go in the direction of more government power until convinced otherwise. Someone on the right, on the other hand, when confronted with a social issue, their immediate response is going to be, well, let the free market take care of it, until someone brings them around to convince them, hey, maybe the government should sort this one out. Similarly, I mean, that's left and right. I think there is actually becoming an up and down that I would classify as, say, classical, brain fart, classical alt or alternative, and possibly new. The classical left and right are the people who use, government channels, mainstream media, your standard sort of political advocacy and lobbying groups. Your alt are the people who use more informal means. Internet messaging boards, private Facebook groups, memes. I don't like, let's go with lingo over code words. I hate the term dog whistle because it's just sort of simplifies and debases whatever base of people it is that know and use that word. It's like it's some sort of secret code, and it's not. It's just lingo. People. I think I was talking about the alt. Bear with me, but let's make a broader category, and let's say these are the non-classical ones. They use memes, they use lingo and slang and make jokes, and they use non-standard means of communicating. Where they divert would be the alt uses identity politics. Think of your Black Lives Matter, and think of your white supremacists, the actual white supremacists who talk about, preserving the white race, etc., etc. And the two things that these two groups have in common is their love of identity politics as a means of sorting between subsections of the population, and their advocacy of violence. Roaming groups of white supremacists, I mean, there's not as many as the media would like to have you think. Otherwise, we would be seeing stories every day and not just warnings, etc. But then go to Portland on any given day ending in, I don't know, fucking why, and there'll be some Antifa mob blocking off a roadway and threatening to punch anyone who they suspect is a Nazi. So there's your alt. I think originally the alt-left was just anyone who wasn't part of the classical establishment, and then that's how Milo originally said, I share some parts of the journey with them, and then when Richard Spencer and all the other racist assholes decided to militarize the movement and turn it into a bunch of dickheads, that's when the mass exodus occurred, and that's where we get what I've called the new right after a subreddit, which is all of the memes and none of the viciousness, in the sense that there's no racism. They're not looking to preserve the white race. They're just looking to push back against identity politics. So we've got our classic left and right. We've got our sort of alt-left and alt-right. We've got our new right. I haven't really seen anything that I might classify as a new left, but that's probably just because I don't run in those circles. I'm fairly moderate, but will be leaning more conservative. Let's be honest. But the reason I like these categories is they're precise in their definitions, but they encompass a large enough area that they don't speak to any specific circumstances. It's not like, hey, if you believe in universal health care, you must be on the left. For example, US gun laws. From what I've seen of them, and I could be wrong, I think they could be a little bit stricter. Do I think banning AR-15s is the answer? No. They're still going to be easy enough to get your hands on if you really want to put the effort in. And let's face it, the most lethal weapon in the United States is a handgun. And again, banning those, not going to do much. So, they say gun control. If you're in favor of stricter gun laws, you must be on the left. And if you oppose banning guns, you must be on the right. Well, what does it mean when you have a little bit of both? So at the end of the God, I'm turning into my father. At the end of the day, Nick's going to pinch my nose and calculate on an invisible calculator. But anyway, I like the idea of a model that doesn't speak to specific issues, but instead deals with general philosophies and inclinations and methods of communication. That's it for me, because otherwise I'm just going to be repeating myself, and enough with the ramblings. So, hey, if you've made it this far, that's impressive, and I'll catch you all later. I'm the Angry Philosopher on Drugs, and think things through. If I can work this shit out, so can you.